Well, welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short, your Bible teacher and cultural commentator. And today we have another video, unfortunately, of a national leader caving in to the LGBTQ lobby, who is caving in and compromising on LGBTQ issues. Now, this is Chris Christie. He is a Republican. He is supposed to be a conservative. He is part of the GOP, the Republican Party, that is supposed to be a conservative party. And yet here is a so-called conservative, someone who conservatives would normally vote for, someone who usually stands up for family values and traditional Judeo-Christian values in society against the onslaught of secular, humanistic, ungodly, immoral values. And so this is someone that has a history of being a conservative and being someone who upholds the traditional Judeo-Christian values. And yet here is an example of a national leader in our country compromising and caving in and bending to the pressure of opposition, who is bending to the pressure of our moral enemy, the liberals, the leftists, the secularists, the relativists, the ungodly, immoral people who are pushing this new agenda on America, something that our country had never seen in all of its existence until just maybe about 50 or 60 years ago. And conservatism, republicanism, has been basically the only political party that has stood against it. Christianity and the Christian church is the only last real bastion against total ungodliness in our society. And now we're seeing cracks in the GOP, we're seeing cracks in Christianity, we're seeing fissures in the church, even the evangelical Bible-believing church. We're seeing compromises and softening and watering down and obfuscation and vague and mostly just by silence allowing our culture to decline right before our very eyes. And most churches basically turn a blind eye to it. They don't fight it. They don't resist it. They don't push back on it. They just, at most, bemoan it and complain about it, but they're not in the fight. Unfortunately, sadly, that even includes evangelical Bible-believing churches. Well, I want to go over some of the pitiful performance here of Chris Christie. In his attitude, he says he's changed his views on gay marriage. Can you imagine that? A moral issue, a core value in the Christian faith, and he says he's changed his views. Now, what in the world would make one who is a Christian who holds to core moral teachings of Christianity change views? Well, we're going to have to find out today, and I'll comment a little bit about it, but this is not the way you go about living before Christ. This is not the way you go about making everything a matter of the lordship of Christ. This is a pitiful compromise by a weak leader. And we need to see more strong leaders and less of these weak leaders, because this is just a total capitulation to the left and to immorality. So let me roll the clip, and then we'll jump in here at places and make commentary.
My name is Camden. I'm a high schooler from Maine. So you've said that you believe that marriage is between a man and a woman, yet many young Americans from my generation believe strongly in support of gay marriage.
Okay, so Chris Christie has gone on record as saying he believes that marriage is only between a man and a woman. That's what he's held to in the past. And here is a young, maybe Gen Z, very young person, and saying, but we young people, we overwhelmingly believe that gay marriage is okay, that people of the same sex should be able to have the same rights and privileges to get married as people of opposite sex. And so she's coming at this Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey, as a young person. And so what would you think? A older person, a person of maybe 2 generations removed from this young person, supposedly wiser, supposedly able to evaluate and articulate morality for the next generation, to pass on morality from one generation to another. And here's a young person coming up to the governor and saying, well, hey, you're out of step with us, the kids. The kids all agree that gay marriage should be legal, but you say you believe that marriage is only between a man and a woman. What's up, governor? You're not following us. Do you get the assumption here? The assumption on the part of this young woman is that the older people should be falling in line with the younger people, and that the younger people should be leading the country and dictating everything, including morality. That's what she's coming at. And she's saying, well, we're the new generation. You have to cater to us and pander to us and cater to us. So let's see what Chris Christie says in response to this.
I was wondering if, as president, your viewpoint on that would change, knowing that many young Americans do not believe in the same thing.
Again, you get the presumption here. We're wondering if your viewpoint will change in light of the fact that young people don't agree with you. Wow. I mean, can you imagine the privilege that comes behind such a statement, and the just the nerve to ask somebody, well, you better start thinking about changing, Governor, because we young people, we don't accept your view on marriage, the view that's been held for centuries and for 2,000 years in Christianity. In the entire Western tradition, Christian moral tradition has affirmed that a marriage is between a man and a woman for a lifetime. That's the moral standard, the bedrock, the foundation of society, the pillar, as Ben Carson likes to call it, the pillar, one of the pillars of society. And he's actually right. The foundation of a society, the first society, before there's this political society, or it's even pre-political, it's the family. The marriage is the first component of the family, and then the children. So you have the marriage is like a pillar of society, and it's always been a man and a woman. And so this new thing, this new invention, if you're an old timer, this newfangled thing called gay marriage just arrived like about 10 years ago. And now young people are putting pressure on the older generation to say, hey, you're not in line with our modern values. And so are you going to change or what? She actually said that, talked about changing the governor's viewpoint because of the young people. And let's see what Christie would say. You would think he would say, well, I appreciate your question, but don't you realize that you don't shift your moral positions based on opinion polls? Let's see if he says that, because I have a feeling he won't.
That you believe in.
Yeah, it already has changed. I mean, look.
It already has changed. What? That was quick. It didn't take very long for him to back down. Wow. Here's a grown-up adult talking to a young woman who I'm not even sure if she's out of her teens yet. She might be in her early 20s. She might be a college student. But she challenged him on his views on a core moral value based on Christianity. And the first words out of his lips were, well, I've already changed. You don't have to worry about me. I've already surrendered. I've already capitulated. I've already got the white flag out, and I'm already telling everyone it's okay now because I've heard you, and I surrender to you because you're wise, you're the authority in my life, and so I have to follow you because you're the young people. Is that crazy? This is, I can't believe it. He has already surrendered when she barely got the question out of her mouth. This is cowardice. This is our leadership class, unfortunately. And it even gets worse. Let's hear the rest of what he says.
I think this is generational. I think you put your finger on it, right?
So it's generational. So then why are you capitulating if it's generational? Okay, so a new generation comes and they have new ideas. So what? This is a core moral value of our Christian faith and the Western world. So you're going to surrender it because a generation doesn't like it, that a man and a woman constitutes a marriage, and they want to change that definition, and you say, oh, well, it's just generational. Young people have different ideas. Okay, let them have their different ideas, but why do you have to follow it? This makes no sense. This is supposed to be a leader. Leader's supposed to lead in front of people, and then there are followers, and those followers follow behind the leader. Well, this is a case of a follower representing followers, the young people. They're not political office. They're not political authorities in our country. They're not in positions of authority and responsibility. And here is the leadership class surrendering to the followers. So why do we need leaders? If we're going to just go direct democracy, if we're just going to go opinion polls, what do we need people in suits like Chris Christie? All we need is a computer and a means by which people can punch a button as to whatever their will is, and then we just make our decisions based on the popular will. No, we need leaders because the popular will cannot be trusted, especially in these areas of moral values. You don't change on a dime moral values, and you especially don't change when there's no argument or rational reason to change other than, well, there's a new generation and they feel different. That's not a good reason to change, especially on moral values.
When I was governor and I was taking that position, I took a lot of heat from my kids because my kids were...
So what? What? He took a lot of heat from his kids? My response to that is, I don't care what your kids think. And I don't think the people of the state of New Jersey and the people that voted for him care one whit what his kids think, because his kids don't know anything. Why should he worry about what his kids think? Are they moral authorities in his life? No, he's supposed to be the parent. He's supposed to teach the values to the kids, and then they pass it on to their kids and pass it on and on and on. That's how morality and Christianity spreads from generation to generation. The older people teach the younger people. They learn the faith. They learn the moral values. Then they pass it on to their generation, and so on and so forth. Instead, Chris Christie is all worried about the young people. Well, I took a lot of heat from my young people, especially my kids. Who cares what your kids think? Are you a man of principle, or are you a milquetoast?
Older at the time, and they were giving me a hard time about it, and I told them, I'm governor, you're not, so...
Well, good. That's a good response. And you should also say, I'm the parent, and you're not. And I know better than you. I've been here around on this earth a lot longer than you have. I've lived life, and I've seen, experienced things. And I can tell you, for one thing, there is no such thing as gay marriage, because marriage, by definition, is a man and a woman joined together in holy matrimony. And that's what the Bible teaches. That's what our Christian faith teaches. That is basically what all civilizations have ever taught since the dawn of man. So this whole idea of gay marriage is nonsense. That's what he should have said and stood up for values. But he didn't. He caved in and he says, I'm taking a lot of heat from my kids. I better change because I don't want to take heat from my kids, which is just the wimp's way out.
I get to take the positions I want to take, and I don't regret doing that. But what I know is that society has changed. And
Again, so what? It doesn't matter on these big moral issues whether society has changed or not. That's the point. And the thing about moral values is it doesn't matter if a majority or a minority affirm a moral principle. A moral principle is beyond opinion polls. So let's say if someday in the future, which we're probably going to face, where the Supreme Court allows for more than two people in a marriage. They've already changed the definition from a man and a woman to a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. And now the next logical step would be, well, let's open it up for 3, 4, 5, 6, or whatever number of participants in a so-called marriage. It would be a polygamous marriage, in other words. So what would be his opinion if a majority of people in the United States, especially the young people, he seems to really honor them, what would happen if a majority of young people favored polygamy? Would he then change that moral value and teaching to throw that out and say, well, the people have spoken, I have to follow them? It sounds like his authority for his life is people, and especially young people.
People are accepting in our country now is different than when I was growing up. Certainly.
Exactly. It's different. So what? I mean, this is so cowardly. I look at the opinion polls. I go with the opinion polls. I raise my finger and see which way the wind is blowing, and whatever the way the wind's blowing, I take that. That's my new moral stand. No, that's not how morality works. And he should know that.
And then when I was your age, and I don't have any objection to it any longer.
Why not? Why don't you have objections? You must not have had any reasons for it to begin with, because there are no good reasons for it. There are no valid, rational arguments in favor of changing the marriage definition from a man and a woman to two men, two women. There is no good reason other than the sexual revolution of the 60s has worked its way into society, and now people feel different. But that isn't a moral argument for changing something as important as marriage. And anyway, you can't change it. In God's eyes, marriage is still a man and a woman. It doesn't matter what the Supreme Court says. It doesn't matter what the majority of Americans say. Can you imagine God caring one whit about what the majority of Americans feel about marriage in the 21st century? He could care less. And he doesn't care what the world population thinks about it. He doesn't care that people have changed and society has changed. Truth is truth. The word of God stands forever. That's what the Bible says. So Chris Christie is making a fool of himself with this kind of reasoning.
In the end, I think I've been convinced. And, that's...
By what? What convinced you? Give us some rational, reasonable arguments for what changed you. So far, you've just said your kids gave you heat for it. So, in other words, you've been convinced because your kids were arguing with you, over the dinner table and pressuring you, and then all of a sudden you said, hey, I don't want to feel this pressure. I think I'll change my mind. And you've convinced me. I no longer believe that marriage is exclusively between a man and a woman. Okay, you won me over. Is that his argument? That is so bad.
Part of being a thinking, breathing human being, I hope, is that you can hold certain opinions at one time and hold them genuinely.
Did you hold it as an opinion? Is that what you're going to say? Marriage between a man and a woman, that definition that's been around since time immemorial, and especially taught in the Christian faith, which you profess, and is in the Bible, and is the moral standard for the Western world for 2,000 years, and then that's an opinion for you? Is that how flimsy you hold to your core value? Do you have a core value? Or is it all just sort of ephemeral? That's what it sounds like. His core value is sort of like the cloud, and it'll change, it'll morph, it'll go off into some different directions depending on what society thinks or what his kids think or the younger generation thinks. This is not what moral values are. Moral values are things that you cling to when everything else is shaking and changing. They are rock solid foundations of a society. That's what a foundation is. If you're changing your foundation all the time, it's not a foundation, because a foundation is something that's steady, solid. It doesn't change, and then you can build things upon it. So he doesn't understand what a foundational moral position is, and he's viewing marriage as his opinion. That's the problem. And I felt there were other ways to be able to deal with same-sex relationships other than just marriage. And that was the argument I made at the time, was that we can accommodate this in other ways. But you know what? Yes. And that seems to be something that he should have stayed with. There are problems with that too. First of all, the gay rights movement wanted what they called civil unions. And reasonable people could say, okay, well, gay people are frustrated because they can't visit their partner in the hospital, and they can't do this and they can't do that, and so they're complaining about that. So that's what a civil partnership would be. It would be simply like a contractual agreement that this person shares certain benefits that allow them to do certain other things in society. Okay, that would not be a marriage-changing definition, but that would allow some accommodations. But that's not what they want. Then when they get that, then they press for more. So that was the slippery slope that a lot of people didn't see, that civil unions and civil partnerships would inevitably lead to demanding more. And they would say, well, see, if you granted civil partnerships, why can't you grant this? And then if you want this, then you can have that. And it all was a big slippery slope, and it actually worked, their strategy. And this is exactly Chris Christie. He agreed to civil partnerships, and then once that was adjusted into society and people got used to that, then the gay rights movement pushed for marriage. And then now that's being normalized and tolerated and made legal by the law, Supreme Court, and now he's fine with that. Now what's next? It's just a slippery slope of immorality.
But I was wrong.
He was wrong. He said he was wrong. Why were you wrong? Are you going to explain why you're wrong in believing that a marriage is between a man and a woman? Why? He's just stating things. He's not giving any reasons why this shift.
And so, for me, it was a process I had to go through to change the way I've been raised. Both.
Well, what was the process? Again, he doesn't give us any details.
From a family perspective and what my mother and father taught me and felt, and also from a religious perspective and what I'm a Catholic and what my church taught me to believe.
Okay, so your parents handed down this moral value of marriage as a man and a woman, and then your church also reinforced that conviction that marriage is a man and a woman. So you're willing to give up the moral and spiritual heritage that your church passed on to you, and then your parents passed on to you, and what you grew up learning, just because young people today don't feel that's right? My goodness, he'll sell out his mother for votes. This is so materialistically and pragmatically outrageous.
But over time, look, this past week or two, Pope Francis is now allowing, blessings of same-sex couples.
Yeah, this is a problem because we have, again, this is a national leadership problem here with Chris Christie, but that's not the end of it. There are international leadership problems. We have this Pope Francis, this terrible, awful Pope who is confusing people and is overturning Christian values. Now, I'm not Roman Catholic. I don't follow the Pope. I don't look up to him as an authority. But in the past, the Roman Catholic Church has held on to many of the basic tenets of the Bible, the moral values of the Bible. Now, they mix in tradition and the hierarchy of their church and all kinds of other things, which is causing a problem now because they, instead of just going to the Bible and saying, what does this teach us? They now go to Pope Francis and say, Pope, what do you teach us? And now he's saying, well, we're going to bless same-sex blessings, unions, and we're going to not say anything bad against homosexuality, and we're going to normalize the idea that two people can be in a relationship, a man and a woman and a woman, and we're not going to make a big problem of that, and we're going to depart from 2,000 years of Christianity, and we're going to make changes. That's the Pope. And that is, and many of the people that he's recruited around him in the Vatican think that way. And many of the churches in the mainline denominations think that way. In fact, the United Methodist Church just split over this whole issue, and the majority of people went off. And now they're going to continue to have gay marriages. And the Lutheran, American Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, they have gay marriages now. They're okay with this. And the PCA, Presbyterian Church USA in the United States now, blesses same-sex unions and all of this. Leadership failure on every level. And now it's even seeping into the evangelical world, because you have people now saying, well, it's okay to have same-sex desires, just don't act on them. And it's okay to be a gay Christian, and it's okay to go to gay weddings as a Christian. All of this is an erosion of the moral values of Christianity.
Even the church is changing. And so
even the church, the impression is the church is changing. Well, it doesn't matter what these visible institutional churches are saying. The Bible teaches it cannot change. And so the true church does not change.
I think this is part of just being honest with people. You can hold certain beliefs firmly, but then as you watch more and more evidence come in, and you meet more and more people, and you listen to them and get to know.
More evidence come in? What? What, have they found a gene in people that says that there must be gay marriage? This makes no sense. And if you listen to people and get to know people, you hear their stories, and your sympathy builds up for them, and you have an emotional response, and then you overlook all morality and go with that emotion. Emotionalism, sentimentality, tearful testimonies of gay people, these are not considered evidence. These are anecdotal evidence. This is not primary evidence. Evidence comes from the moral teachings that have come down from the Bible and Christianity, not the changing experiences of the day.
Know them, your opinion can change, and mine has changed over time on this. And so I don't look back and have regret, because I know that I didn't do what I did out of any sense of prejudice or bias. It was just what I believed could be done and should be done. And even back then, I used to say, look, my argument with the legislature was that we shouldn't decide this, put it on the ballot, let people decide. And if they vote to have same-sex marriage, then I'll enforce the law like I'll enforce every other.
What a coward. He won't take the lead. He'll just let the people decide. Right.
Law. But you're absolutely correct that my personal opinion, you stated correctly, was I thought that marriage should just be between a man and a woman. That's the way I was taught, that's the way I was brought up, and that's what I believed. But your generation has changed my mind. So
your generation has changed my mind. This is really sick. The young people changed his mind. Didn't take very much. It just took a majority of people voting, and he's willing to just change on the dime. That is so sick. Well, anyway, we are running out of time here. I just wanted to bring this to your attention. We need to be praying for our leaders at every level, our political leaders, our civic leaders, our social leaders, and especially our church leaders and our Christian leaders, that they not cave in on this issue. We'll see you back next week. God bless.